Well, good morning and welcome to the Breastplate Prayer Devotional. I'm your host, Bishop Larry Jackson. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are behind the veil, and we did that in the last session. And I told you I would sit here and continue. And we talked about what it looks like behind that veil, that the Ark of the Covenant is there, only one piece of furniture that's 4 feet tall, 2 feet wide, 2 feet long. And we understand that it is made of shittim wood and it's overlaid with gold. And so we've got that. We also understand that this was a once a year thing where Aaron went in to offer blood on the mercy seat. That is, it is consisting of a seat, but also consisting of the two angels on each end of the seat that are touching their wings and looking towards the mercy seat and representing righteousness and judgment. And so we are clear on that, and that inside, and this is where we stop, so we can jump right in here. But what we found that's inside of the Ark of the Covenant, we found 3 articles and 3 things that are there. And what we have is Aaron's rod that budded, a golden pot of manna, and the 10 commandments. And now I told you, I'll tell you about what they meant when we come back. Now we're going to go into them pretty extensively, but right now I just want you to understand what they mean so that we can keep moving concerning the ark itself. And so these three things that are inside. First, Aaron's rod that budded represents God's authority or God's leadership. Okay, God's authority / God's leadership. And that's Aaron's rod that budded. We'll talk about that and how that came about. Also, the golden pot of manna talks of God's provision. You know that every day they went out and they got manna, but they could not keep the manna. This is the only manna that remained beyond any day. Okay, after a day it was gone, and we'll talk about that. And then the 10 commandments is God's order. We call them the commandments. Actually, we could also call them God's promises. Okay, there were 10 promises to the people, but also God's order. And so that is the 3: God's leadership and authority and leadership, God's provision, and God's order. Those 3 things are there at the Ark of the Covenant. So blood, the Bible tells us in Hebrews that the blood of animals was only used as a substitute because the blood could not take away the sins of man permanently. So now not only were we satisfying righteousness and judgment, we were also satisfying the fact that God had given authority, that God had given provision, and God had given order, and the blood was also speaking to that as well. So now what I want to do is take you to Hebrews chapter 9, because in Hebrews chapter 9, the writer of Hebrews really takes us into the fact of what I just finished mentioning, that it had to be just a substitute for the sacrifice that took place on the Day of Atonement, because it could not take away man's sin on a permanent basis. Yet Aaron went there every year on the Day of Atonement so that their sins would be forgiven for a year. And so Hebrews chapter 9, again, we've done a lot of stuff in the church for years and talk about a lot of things, much as we talk about the blood of Christ, and we will dive into that. But as we talk about the blood of Christ, and a lot of times the people that hear that don't really understand the significance of the blood of Christ, don't really understand the significance of why he had to pour out his blood. Now, we also know, and we will get to that even later, that we know that he not only is pouring out his blood, but the Bible also said he poured out his soul unto sin. So we will deal with that as well as we get a little deeper in this. But Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1 says, "Then verily the first covenant had also divine ordinances of divine service and a worldly sanctuary." So this is the sanctuary. This holy place, holy of holies, is called the sanctuary. The outer court is not called the sanctuary. It's the tent of meetings that's called the sanctuary. And here, the writer of Hebrews says that it was the first covenant, and there was divine ordinance and divine service done there, but it was a worldly sanctuary. He says a worldly sanctuary. Why is it a worldly sanctuary? Because it's in the world. It's in the world. Okay, now watch, and there will be a distinction made between this one and the other one that is heavenly in just a few minutes. So Hebrews 9 and 2 says, For there was a tabernacle made, the first wherein was the candlestick. We got that, the table and the shewbread, which is called the sanctuary. Okay, so again, this is the sanctuary. This tent of meetings is the sanctuary. And now we've already seen the tabernacle in the holy place. We saw the candlestick, which is the menorah. We saw the table of showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And then he says, and after the second veil. Now, notice he's saying the second veil. And so here, what was the first veil? If there was a second veil, there had to be a first veil. Well, the first veil in the writer of Hebrews' mind is the door of the tent of meetings. Because remember, no one in the outer court could come into the door of the tent of meetings other than the Kohites and Aaron and his sons. So this is a veiled place then to everybody. And again, I told you that when they walked into the place, it's as though they disappeared because no one could see them and nobody could see what was going on there. So that was the first veil. The second veil is this veil that is in front of the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, that not even the priest could go behind, not even Aaron could go behind until the Day of Atonement. Okay, and so in verse 3 it says, and after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, which is the Holy of Holies. Okay, so all of this makes up the sanctuary. So which had the golden censer, watch this now, and the Ark of the Covenant overlaid round about with gold. Now I told you there's only one piece of furniture behind the veil, and that is right. And many people have mistaken verse 4 and the golden censer to be the golden altar of incense. Okay? Notice that what is amazing in this whole reading so far is he's mentioned the sanctuary. He's mentioned the candlestick, the menorah, the seven branch candlestick. He's mentioned the table of showbread. He's mentioned he didn't mention the first veil, but now you got to think about the first veil because he says the second veil. So he's mentioned the veil, okay? And then he mentions the golden censer, and he mentions the Ark of the Covenant. I'm telling you that the golden censer is not the golden altar of incense. So the thing that he doesn't mention at all is the golden altar of incense. And why would he not mention that, as important as it is, as we looked at it when we were dealing with it in our worship? Now, I believe I have revelation concerning why, and I will tell you soon. But first, let me tell you because I've got to tell you, if you remember, I have showed you through two crosses. Remember on Calvary, there are three crosses. I've showed you two. I showed you the cross of the formation of the nation with the entire tabernacle and fence and all of that in the center of the nation, and a perfect cross based on the numerical order of the tribes, makeup of the tribes. I also showed you that the brazen altar of incense, the brazen altar of sacrifice, the brazen altar that's in the outer court represents the cross that Jesus died on. Okay? But there's another cross, and I haven't showed it to you yet, and I haven't gotten to it yet. We're there, and I will show it to you soon and talk about why this thing had all three crosses. And this is amazing. And that's when I will reveal to you the revelation I believe I have about why the writer of Hebrew does not talk about at all the golden altar of incense. So what is this golden censer then? Well, the golden censer, you've seen it. You've seen it. You've seen a priest carry it. You've actually seen the Pope with it. He carries around a golden censer. What do you mean? It's a pot, a little pot with incense in it, smoke coming out, and you see a priest and walking down the aisle and they're swinging it back and forth. Okay, that is the golden censer. Aaron had one also. He had the golden censer. This golden censer. So now, not only is he going behind the veil with the blood of the lamb, the unblemished lamb, for the sins of the people and his sins, he also takes in there worship. He takes in there incense, which is representing worship, to worship God before his throne. Okay? And so, verse 9, now let's go back to the 3. He says, after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot of manna. See, we've talked about that. And Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. Okay? And over it, the cherubim. So now we know over the mercies, the cherubims over the mercy seat were cherubims of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, which we cannot speak particularly. And so the writer of Hebrews said, we can't even tell you what all about that, because we just know they were there, but we can't give you a whole lot of insight on it. That's what he's saying here. And so, but it was over the mercy seat. We know that their wings were touching. We do know that. We do know they were looking down, and that. And so as a result of that, they're over the mercy seat, made of one piece of gold. So this is an amazing thing. But these 3 articles that God has said put in there, golden pot of manna, Aaron's rod of budded, and the table of the table of the covenants are there. Okay? And so those are the things that are there. So you have this in your toolbox. This is Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1 through 5. Now, we're not finished with this, but we're going to come back to it, and we're going to deal with it even further. And just as look, I told you, I'm not going, and I'm going to sit here because we've done this through the entire tent, really. I sit here and finish the whole teaching. All right, guys, God bless you. Thank you so very much for being here. Again, go to the website, BishopLarryJackson.com. Get your Breastplate Prayer Journal. As I said, you're going to need it. I bless you so much. Bye-bye.